We're back with Dan Perkins, the author of The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, A Terrorist Perspective. And right at the break, I said, I want to find out how and why you picked that title.
That's a great question. It's also one of those questions I'm not very good at answering.
We'll try.
I felt that as I started to write the book, I felt that a lot of people in not only the United States but around the world don't really understand terrorists and what motivates terrorists.
Is it money?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And being in the financial game, you can see that better than a lot of other people?
Absolutely. When I did my first radio interview with you, I was on a radio tour, and I did a radio interview with this talk show person in Baltimore, Maryland. And I told him that I had just sent out a press release about the Boston Marathon bombing. And I said, what people need to understand in this country is that the Boston Marathon bombing was not about body count. It was about dollar counts.
Right.
And he said, I never thought of it that way before. Could you explain? I said, in 5 days, those two young men shut down the city of Boston and the metropolitan area, tight as a drum. Go home, the government said to the people, go home, lock your doors and windows, and stay in. In 5 days, it cost the city of Boston $1 billion.
Oh, yeah, easy.
And I say September 11th wasn't about the body count, the 2,700 people who died in the World Trade Center. It was trying to bring down the American markets.
That's right.
Close the American markets. Why? In the book I talk about, the reason why they're doing that is that if they take the money away from America, they take away America's power.
That's right.
And people said, well, why did you call it a terrorist perspective? And I said, I needed to tell people how I believe these people think. People read the book and they say, I don't know when I'm walking on this edge, is it fiction or is it fact or is it both? Like the headline on the book says, this book is as current as today's headlines, but perhaps scarier than tomorrow's. And
most people, wouldn't you say, Dan, have no idea. You know, I hate to be this way, but they live in their little world, this little circle. And they don't go beyond that circle. So when these things happen, and you know, I was lucky, Dan. I lived all over the world. And I got to see all these things that were going on. And I saw the threats that we were dealing with. And I saw the bombings in England and a lot of other things that were going on. So when I came back here, it shocked me that people weren't more observant about the world. So I think being in the money business, you see this all the time and you understand what they're trying to do.
Right.
You know, it's really funny because when I was in Turkey, there were two economies. There was the cash economy, and then there was the bank economy. There was more in the cash economy than there was in the bank economy.
Right.
And they were carrying bags of money. And I'd never seen that before, where there were maybe thousands or millions of dollars, not, you know, the currency supposedly, but actual that amount of money, and that's how they dealt. So tell us give us a little eye view of the beginning of the book. Who the characters are.
The beginning of the book starts in central Syria. In essence, what we have is a new terrorist organization that is not aligned, it's not a splinter group with Al-Qaeda, and I'll explain that in a moment. I say to people that the 5 men who are the terrorists in this group are not your father's terrorists. What I mean is, they don't live in caves, they don't have beards, they don't wear towels on their head, they're just a new generation of terrorists. They don't carry guns. And so the leader, Mohammed al-Sargon, who forms the group, at the very first meeting, he talks about his terrorist think tank. The 4 men, one is from a graduate from the London School of Economics, one is an MIT graduate, one is a Stanford graduate petroleum engineer, and the other one is from New York University. They are petroleum engineers, nuclear scientists, business people, and computer and technology people. Not who most people would think about being a terrorist. And he gives them this charge, the very first part of the book. He wants the group to look at all of the attacks that Al-Qaeda has brought against the United States, whether it's in the United States or outside the United States. And the charge is, what did they do wrong?
And that's different to start with.
What did they do wrong? Because he's criticizing Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden in their activities. Then he says to them, he tells them that they have an alliance with the Iranian nuclear program to rebuild and recondition 2 Soviet Union suitcase-dirty bombs to make them into full-blown nuclear devices. And then he says to them, each of you have 2 bombs. How would you use them and why?
And why would you use a bomb?
How would you use it, where, and why? What outcome are you looking for? See, he says when he looks at the Al-Qaeda, they didn't have a long-term perspective. They were blowing up buildings or trying to blow up ships, but they didn't have a long-term strategy. What Sargon is saying to his think tank, when you decide where you're going to use these bombs, what is the long-term damage to the American economy? Yeah.
Right. So it goes from there.
Yes.
Very smart. And the one thing that I found out before the show was that this is a sequel.
Actually, it's the first book of a trilogy.
And
yes.
The trilogy is all under the Brotherhood of the Red Nile.
Yes. Book 1 is titled The Terrorist Perspective.
Right.
The working title for Book 2, America Rebuilds.
Right.
And Book 3, America Responds.
Okay, that kind of gives me kind of an idea, right?
Well, there are people who, when they hear
rebuilds.
Rebuild means that something happened. Well,
yeah.
Yes, something did happen.
Right.
Two disasters. The 2 bombs do go off. But in Book 3, America Responds, the people who have not read because I'm about 90% way of Book 3. Book 2 should be out in late November, early December.
Go ahead.
Book 3, the America Response, it's like there are certain things that are assumed by people which are false.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to bomb the hell out of them. Not necessarily. I mean, maybe that's the way we did it in the past, but the conclusion of the trilogy in Book 3, you're not going to be able to see it coming.
And that's what's so exciting about you, not even being a writer,
right.
Going to a class and coming out with 1,000 words and knowing that you really hit a talent for this. And on that note, I need you to give your website out.
Sure.
And if you do that right now?
Sure. It's Dan Perkins at the letters AT, sanibel.com.
And we'll be right back on Kathryn Raaker's Born Before 64.